Namaskar, Nilesh Oak here with another session of Shraddha and Pradnya. In this session number 26, Shraddha and Pradnya series, we are going to continue our exploration into the astronomy evidence of the planets from the Mahabharata text. In the previous episode in this series, we briefly looked at the jaws of Jupiter. And in this episode, we are going to combine it with Saturn's slap. Okay, this is the evidence that nailed 5561 BCE as the year of the Mahabharata war. Recall, those of you who have read my books, but also those of you who have listened to many of my other videos or read my blogs. The Arundhati Vasishta observation has beautifully narrowed down the interval to about 5,000 to 6,000 year time period from 11,091 BCE to 4508 BCE, or a more refined outcome of the Arundhati Vasishta observation is the further narrower interval from 10,248 BCE to 4636 BCE. Now we have to look for the year of Mahabharata war within this limit. That's scientific, that is logical, that is tarka shuddha and not tarka dushta. However, the evidence of the Mahabharata text, the planetary evidence, is so spectacular that even if, let's say, there was no Arundhati Vasishta observation, and we are so glad that it is there. In fact, it tells a fascinating story of Indian astronomy. And suppose we did not have the Bhishma Nirvana evidence, which is again another fascinating evidence that tells the story of Indian Itihasa writing, but also Indian astronomy. Purely astronomy evidence of planets alone is and was capable of taking us to 5561 BCE. However, when we have no idea whatsoever where the Mahabharata war could have happened, in that sense, the Arundhati Vasishta is absolutely phenomenal, and so is the evidence of Bhishma Nirvana. In fact, the advantage of that evidence will always be there, because as you see, there are these planetary references, and to an extent, they can be interpreted in 2 or 3 different ways. Of course, there are ways to show why a certain interpretation is not valid and why only other interpretation is valid. But, for ordinary Mahabharata enthusiasts, that can become taxing, that can become overwhelming. And frankly, this bit complex nature of astronomy evidence is what is being exploited, made use of by many Mahabharata dating researchers in an extremely unfair way to push their agenda. And that's when the beauty of Arundhati Vasishta observation comes in. And that's where the beauty of the entire 6 plus, 23 plus, 60 plus, and 100 plus, depending on how you count, pieces of evidence related to Bhishma Nirvana comes into the picture. But let's look at but once you get this interval, whether using Arundhati Vasishta observation or Bhishma Nirvana observation, still all you get is the interval, which is fascinating, by the way. Do you know why? Because the intervals produced by Arundhati Vasishta observation alone, or the interval produced by Bhishma Nirvana evidence alone, or a interval produced by these 2 observations in combination, that interval And the force of these two observations, or two sets of observation, I should say, is so powerful that it decisively falsifies any claim for the year of Mahabharata war that falls after 5000 BC. Together, 5000 BC and after, sorry, you cannot have Mahabharata war. That's how powerful, fascinating, scientific, consistent, objective, empirical this evidence is. But now we are going to get into the planetary evidence. And how do you decide a specific year within a time interval? Now, that is not given by either Arundhati Vasishtha observation, that is not given by the Bhishma Nirvana evidence. In fact, that cannot be given by any other loose pieces of evidence used individually. Just only Saturn evidence will not give you that. Only Jupiter evidence will not give you that. Any other individual planetary evidence will not give you that. Now, in a way, Mars evidence will give you that, but not one piece of evidence, all the 8 pieces of evidence. And it will still leave many questions unanswered if the other planetary evidence was not there. Long story short, it is the Saturn and Jupiter evidence that finally nailed it to 5561 BCE. Now, once it does it, then all the other evidence beautifully fits like pieces of jigsaw puzzle, and the puzzle is complete. Let's look at this. Last time we looked at jaws of Jupiter, the quick summary of it, and also the retrograde motion of Jupiter and Saturn together in the vicinity of Vishakha. Okay, so this is that reference that we discussed last time. In terms of who are we talking about? Well, it's the Brihaspati, the 2 planets, Tamra, Runashiko, with coppery extensions. Okay, Brihaspati, and here we only highlighted Brihaspati because we were looking at the evidence of Brihaspati, but notice there is a Shanishchara next to it. Shamograha there, and I have asserted that Shamograha is nothing but Jupiter. And then Brihaspati again for the 17th day of the war. What about it? Well, let's look at it. In one place, it is going Vakra near Nakshatra Shravan. We have already explored this. Okay, so that should be part of our background knowledge now. No one should have a question, oh, what is that Vakra thing? If you have that question, which means you have not watched my previous videos in this Shraddha and Pradnya series, you need to stop this. You go and watch those videos before continuing here. What about the Sthito? Becoming steady. What does that tell us? They are going retrograde very likely. Samvastaras Thainancho. They are in one place, becoming steady for a year. Yeah, that's what Jupiter and Saturn will do. Jupiter will move only within one Rashi space, one zodiac space of 30 degrees on an average. Saturn is going to move only within a space of, on an average, one nakshatra space, like 12 degrees, 13 degrees. They have become steady, they will be steady, but something else is going to tell us something more. And then below, related to the Jyeshtha nakshatra, the Shamograha, it has become Akramya, meaning come near that nakshatra, and has become Tishtati, meaning steady. And then on the 17th day of the war, Jupiter is doing a Pida. We are going to deal that separately, just like we dealt with a Vakra separately. Let's go further. How? How is this being done? Guess what? The Brihaspati and of course Shanishchara, both planets, they have become bright. Prajvalito, Ubho, both of them have become bright. But you'll find something very interesting. Even a differential between Jupiter and Saturn in the context of their becoming bright, just like we looked at Mars, Prajvalito Ghora, scary bright. We are going to see that differential when we look at additional evidence. How fascinating. All right. And so how on the 17th day of the war is that Brihaspati is giving Pida to Rohini by becoming bright like or in the same fashion like the Chandra and Surya, Chandra Arka. The way they had done it before, that's how Brihaspati is doing it. And Akramya and Tishtati we looked at, which is also a description of a retrograde. All right. The last one, where is this happening? Well, Jupiter is going Vakra near Shravan. Brihaspati and Shanishchara, Jupiter and Saturn, by becoming bright, both planets with coppery extensions are in the vicinity of a nakshatra Vishakha for becoming steady up to a year. That is again retrograde motion. If you come down to Shamograha, Jeshtha Akramya Tishtati, while becoming bright, Prajvalita Sahapavaka, that is also what? The characteristic signature, okay, signature of a retrograde motion. And Brihaspati is giving Pida to who? Rohini, by becoming similar to Chandra and Surya, or the way Chandra and Surya did it to Rohini. And we will look at that as a separate category. Now let's look at the Saturn's slap. Again, you will find that Mahabharata evidence, exceptions none other than 5561 BCE. How many pieces of evidence do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 pieces of evidence, at least that I found. If there is anything additional out there, do bring it to my notice. There is some repetition of it, but it's separate independent evidence. So we have to count this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 pieces of evidence. Guess what? Other than 5561 BCE, no other Mahabharata researchers, exceptions none, will dare to discuss all of this evidence. They will simply not discuss it. Expect change of goalpost, except going on a tangent, expect they confusing common people, expect accusations about me, at me, ad hominem, any kind of distractions, all the kinds of distractions, fallacies. Okay, so for example, we talk about the Vada, but after that Jalpa, somehow trying to prove how they are right. Vitanda, there are many folks who will want to argue with me, but they don't have their own claim, they don't have their own position. That's a Vitanda. That is worthy of a rebuke. Jalpa is worthy of a rebuke. Now, in Jalpa, you give that person a chance. You're saying, hold on, you have not presented your position. Okay, what is your evidence? Vitanda, you get a chance and says, hey, that's a Vitanda. Now you do it second time, you'll be removed. But after that, there is a Hetva Bhasa, Chala, Jati, and Nigrasthana. Fallacies, okay, or futilities are offered. You expect all of this in order to defend or in order to divert your attention from the fact that no other Mahabharata researcher will dare to discuss all of this evidence. So somebody will say, yeah, I can discuss it. No. Discuss means you have to not only discuss this evidence, but show in a consistent fashion, in a scientific fashion, in a logical fashion, how this evidence matches for their claimed year of the Mahabharata war. And if it is specifically a specific day, such as like in case of Jupiter, 17th day of the war, then you have to show that that is true for their date in that particular year. Let's apply that same who, where, how, etc. here. Who are we talking here? Of course, it's all Saturn, but just look at it. Shanaishchara, Shvetograha, and I am asserting, just like I said there, Shamograha refers to Jupiter. Here I'm asserting that Shvetograha refers to Saturn. Now, just like what I said for Shamograha, same thing applies here. Other Mahabharata researchers, someone else will say, well, hold on. You just Shamograha, how does it tell you that it's a Jupiter? Well, I have shown that with evidence and I will show it with evidence again. And how do you know Shvetograha is Saturn? Well, I'm going to show this here again. But because Shveto and Shamo are generic names, if other Mahabharata researchers want to claim Shveto as some other planet and not Saturn, Shamograha as some other planet and not Jupiter, be my guest. But as soon as you tell and first thing explain why you have not bothered to do anything with these two until now, that's number one. But as soon as you say Shveto is equal to this planet or Shamo is equal to this planet, then you have to show how the description that is given here, 3.19, matches for whatever the planet they are claiming, for whatever the date they are claiming. Ditto for Shamograha. I am asserting Shveto Graha is Saturn. Then we have Graha Tamra Arunshiko, 2 planets with their coppery extensions. Okay, and let's see what else. Yeah, Surya Putra, that is again Saturn, and again you have a Shaneshchara. Who? That's what we are talking. What about it? Okay, in this first side here, they are Pidayati, Pidayannesha, and also have become steady. So these planets have become steady and they are giving Pida to who? We will come to that in a minute there. Here, Samati Kramya Tishtati. Remember, we saw for Shamogra, Akramya. Indra Tejasvi Nakshatram Jeshta Akramya Tishtati. Here, Shveto Grahastata Chitra Samati Akramya Tishtati. And Sthito, again it has become steady, and Samvastar Sthainancho, again becomes steady in the certain region. We'll see which region for a year. Okay, the time period is also given. Then here at the bottom, again Akramya. Okay. Bhagam Nakshatra Akramya Surya Putrena Pidate. Again Akramya. Okay, very similar to that Samati Kramya. Okay, now word Pidyate is there. We will refer to that because remember we are talking Pida there, and the last one is Vyadrushanta. They were seen, okay, together in the vicinity. Who? Moon and Saturn. That is on the 18th day of the Mahabharata war. What we are going to do today, in this episode, we are only going to look at the retrograde motions of Saturn and Jupiter together. In a way, we have done this before, but we are going to do this for specific reasons. And there are some additional nuances. We are also going to address that because many other Mahabharata dating researchers have made a royal mess out of that particular description. How? Okay, what is happening here? Prajwalata, Prajwalita. So when Brihaspati and Shaneshwara together, Jupiter and Saturn are together, they are described, both of them, as a Prajwalita, which means what? The observation was made when both of them were in the retrograde. Okay, Prajwalita, and so on. All right, and where? Pidayati, Prajapatyam hi nakshatra. That nakshatra whose devata is Prajapati, that's Rohini. Everyone ought to know this. If you don't know it, you have to take it with the Pujya Buddhi, Shraddha Buddhi. If that doesn't work for you, you need to stop this. Go back to a reference text on Indian astronomy. Convince yourself that the Prajapatya nakshatra refers to Rohini, then only come back. Below there, very distinctly, clearly it is said it is a nakshatra Rohini. Rohini Pidayannesha Sthito Rajashaneshchare. Then if you go here, that Shveto Graha, which I'm asserting it's a Saturn, has settled near Akramya, come near and become steady, Tishtati, near Nakshatra Chitra. And then let's go down. So yeah, and then the 2 planets, which is Jupiter and Saturn, okay, with coppery extensions, becoming bright, becoming steady for a long time, like a year, doing something to Saptarshis, which we are going to address afterwards, in the vicinity of Vishakha. That's 2 retrograde planets going, 2 planets going retrograde, Jupiter and Saturn, in the vicinity of Vishakha. Okay, and here Bhaga Nakshatra. So that Saturn has come near, okay, Akramya, near Nakshatra Bhaga, and is there. Now it doesn't say settled, but we have that in other places. And the last one, where is this happening? Saturn in the context of a moon, Saturn with moon. Now what I'm going to do, out of this, Saturn's set of observations for Saturn and set of observations for Jupiter, I am going to pull only those observations which are relevant to retrograde motion. Okay, so steady, etc. So these are those 4 verses. Out of those 4, 2 are for Jupiter, and if you look at it, 3 are for Saturn. Okay, so who? Again, I won't repeat, we just did that. What about it? Steady, Akramya and Tishtati, Akramya and Tishtati. okay, in one near something and becoming steady, becoming sthira there, that is tishtati. How? By becoming prajvalita, 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 sahapavaka. Now, you notice something interesting? When the description is related to the Saturn, like such as this, or when it is related to Saturn again in the context of Bhaga Nakshatra, but it is Saturn, the word Prajvalita is missing. Of course, the Prajvalita word is here in the context of the two. We will see why that is so. Okay, but I'll do that in a minute. And where is this stuff happening? Both of them. See, in the vicinity of a Vishakha is to be understood only when you are looking at the retrograde motions of both Jupiter and Saturn, settling in this region for a year, becoming bright and so on. If you just purely look individually at the Jupiter, you will see, it's happening, that retrograde is happening in the region of Nakshatra Jyeshtha. If you look at the location of Saturn, you will see Bhagam Nakshatra Akramya Surya Putrena Pidate. That Bhaga Nakshatra is, the Surya Putra, that is Saturn, is near Nakshatra Bhaga. And if you look at the purely against Saturn, Shvetograha, it has settled near Nakshatra Chitra. Now, I said Mars shows the most brightness, most spectacular when it goes retrograde, followed by Jupiter, and then, of course, followed by Saturn. This is among the superior planets, the planets outside the Earth in a solar system. Now, Venus and Mercury by themselves are bright, okay? And of course, they get very bright when they go retrograde, but they are as such bright whenever we see them typically. But let's look at why possibly the brightness, like as a Prajvalita, is not mentioned for Saturn when Saturn alone is described, but it is mentioned for Jupiter. And when it comes to Mars, it is described as scary bright. Even such simple, useful, interesting, curious, and factual nuances about the superior planets when they go retrograde are captured by Vasudev in embedding the astronomy evidence of the planets in the Mahabharata text. Now, well, look at this, okay? Now, those of you who are not familiar with the brightness or a magnitude, okay, this is what it is, sorry. Okay, this is the brightness variation of a planets. Just let's get rid of the inner planets. So Venus, Venus is pretty bright, no matter when you look at it, okay? -4, by the way, the negative scale meaning brighter. Negative the scale, brighter it is, okay? So therefore, look at Neptune and Uranus, their scale is like a 6 and 8, which means like you actually don't see them unless you are seeing through a telescope. Now, Mars, very interesting, Mercury in the middle here, very interesting, will not go into the detail, but the point is when it is retrograde, which is usually when it is close to the sun, it is very bright, okay, but it can become very dim, okay. We will not go into that because that's not relevant, why it happens and so on for our study. Notice Mars. Mars shows that spectacular variation from when it is in the middle, meaning middle is what? Very close to the sun. It's not retrograde. It's relatively dim. But when it goes like, think of this as 180 degree away in the opposition to the sun. This is the position with respect to the sun, the elongation. So when it's like 180, it's always goes retrograde, and it's extra bright, Prajulito Ghora. That is that red patch you see. Jupiter also shows that variation. Here it is near sun and not in retrograde. When it is 180 degree opposite in opposition, it is retrograde and it does get brighter. Right now you can see the Jupiter in the sky, by the way, at night. And Saturn, yes, there is a variation, and it does, if you look at the ends of this graph, it does go up, but just a little, not much difference. That is very likely one reason why Vasudev, when describing Saturn alone, doesn't talk about the Prajvalita aspect of it, even when it talks about the retrograde aspect of Saturn. How fascinating, how precise, how accurate, how beautiful. All right. And yes, so Jupiter and Saturn in the vicinity of Vishakha. We have done the simulation. We will do the simulation again. But just to give you a visual picture, this is how it would look like. That star is where the Vishakha is. Okay. And if you watch this happening for a samvatsara, for a year's time, this is how it would have looked like. An actual in simulation, I will show that. I have already shown it to you, but I am going to show this to you again at least twice to bring out some additional nuances that you must understand to see how precise, how accurate these descriptions are by Vasudev in the Mahabharata text for the planets, okay, and their different motions, their brightness, and so on. So Vishakha is right in the middle. Okay, so Jupiter was near Jeshta, and in about a year, it went through this area here. Okay, 2 plus nakshatra, that's what it will do. It will go about 30 degrees. Okay, one nakshatra is 13 degrees. And what about Saturn? Saturn will travel through about one nakshatra. That's exactly what it is doing. That is that reference to samvatsara sthainancho graha prajwalito ubho vishakhayo samipasto bruhaspati shaneshcharo. Okay, we still have to address the issue of Tamra Runashikha. And also, what is this whole connection of the Jupiter and Saturn near Vishakha with Saptarshi? Okay, we are going to understand this from the astronomy, simple astronomy, but we are also going to understand this from the additional astronomy descriptions from the Mahabharata text. Okay, just be ready for being more fascinated. All right, and this is indeed, of course, happening in the vicinity of Vishakha and Vishakha. Now, remember, I said the observation is for a time plus minus 1 year. And how do I say that? Well, I mean, on what basis? The basis is the evidence itself. Okay, so you'll actually look at the Shabda Praman, then you try to have the background knowledge of each planet, such as Jupiter, Saturn, and so on, and use that knowledge to draw the inference, Anuman. And that tells me that we have to go plus minus 1 year. 1 year here is given, Samvatsara Sthainancho. But remember, Jupiter is described in the context of Vishakha. Jupiter, so you can see it here. Jupiter is described in the context of Jeshta. Okay, Shamo Graha Prajulita Saduma Sahapavaka Indra Tejasvi Nakshatram Jeshta Akramya Tishtati. And Jupiter is described in the context of Shravana, right in the context of the Mahabharata war. So if you go now 1 year extra, the other side, let's say, this is how you would say it. So Saturn has gone one additional nakshatra space and it has now arrived close to Chitra. And Jupiter has gone from where it was, like say, Mula, Purvashada, now to Uttarashada and Shravan. It has come near Shravan. That's where it is going to exhibit the Vakri motion. It's going to cross the ecliptic from the north to the south near Nakshatra Shravan, as described by Vasudev. Okay, so this is how I describe the evidence is described over a period of plus minus 1 year. Here I just showed it to you using Jupiter and Saturn. Now remember, the Saturn is now near Chitra. And what is the significance of this? The significance of Saturn near Chitra is what? This one. Shveto grastatha chitram samati kramya tishtati. Okay, based on actually what I was seeing, I went backward to see what the Shvetograha could be. Okay, of course, keep in mind that kind of guesswork is not required when you are saying Brahaspati Shaneshcharo or when you are saying Bhaga Nakshatra Akramya Surya Putrena Pidate. So we know the location of Surya Putra, the Saturn near Bhaga Nakshatra. We know that Saturn has to do something in the vicinity of a Vishakha. We know Jupiter has to do something in the vicinity of Vishakha. We know Jupiter has to do something in the vicinity of a Shravan. And based on that information, I drew the inference that Shamagraha must be Brahaspati. So I want you to understand the logical, consistent, and directional thought process in identification of Shamagraha, identification of Shvetagraha. Again, let me repeat, these are generic names. And someone else may want to assume Shamagraha and Shvetagraha to be something else, and that's absolutely fair. However, the scientific and logical requirement is that as soon as they identify them, they have to show how these descriptions match for whatever planet other Mahabharata dating researchers assume or claim, and how they match for their date. All right, so basically that's it. Again, notice even as simple criteria as the brightness of the superior planets of Mars, which shows the most spectacular scene. That, think of this curve here, showing the variation. And Jupiter followed by Mars is the Jupiter who shows that variation, and Saturn does show some variation, practically no variation. Therefore, a exclusive reference of Saturn does not mention Prajvalita, even when it mentions the retrograde motion. All right, and then I showed you how it is going to do this. Okay, quickly my books. Again, all of this knowledge is to help you understand what is written in the book, which means you have to, if you have not read it, grab a copy of the book. If you already have a copy and you have read it, this is a time to revisit the book again. Open the book, particular error elimination experiments, as you watch these videos. You can pause the video, you can open the specific page and go and see how it matches beautifully. If you are in India, from Subbu Publications. Quickly, what I'm going to show you, and I want to remember that I share it again with you. This simulation that I showed in another episode, and I am showing it to you today, I'll be showing it to you again. It is that important. If you remember, and if you have not watched this, you have to go and watch the previous episode also related to jaws of Jupiter. Okay, only 26 seconds of simulation that was recorded can actually validate, corroborate 6+ references, possibly 8 references. I have a post somewhere, and I will find that post and share it with you in another session of Shraddha and Prajna. Okay, so this is going back more than about 2 years ago. Okay, 2 years before the first day of the Mahabharata war. Vishakha is where I have locked it. Okay, Jupiter is here near Anuradha. Saturn is near Uttara Falguni. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go just 2 or 3 seconds here in the simulation, and I'll explain why. Okay, so what does this do is my Saturn is here near Uttara Falguni. Bhagam Nakshatra Akramya Surya Putrena Pidate. My Jupiter is near Jeshta. Okay, that is Shamo Graha Prajvalita Saduma Sapavaka Indra Tejasvi Nakshatra Jeshta Akramya Tishtati. Now you'll see Jeshta is going to, sorry, the Jupiter is going to go retrograde. Okay, and I have shown this before. I'm going to show this to you again because it will happen anyways, which is you will see Mars doing a retrograde and becoming scary bright. Dhruvo Prajvalita Ghoram, Prajvalita Ghoram. Okay, so let's do that. I'll be stopping it at some point. Notice now Jupiter is going retrograde. Saturn is also going retrograde, but it doesn't move much. Just remember that. Okay, all right. And I'm going to stop it again when Mars shows up. So this is Mercury ahead of Saturn. Okay. Mercury is going to go around Saturn. That's how, Mercury is going to go around the sun, forgive me, not Saturn, as seen from the Earth. Okay, so when actually it crosses the sun, we don't see it. Okay, it becomes extinct, or in astrology, they call it combust. Okay, so it is so close to the sun, we don't see it. That happens to Venus also. Now, this is Venus next to Saturn. All right, so let it go. Now notice this Mars. Okay, right now it's not that bright. It's coming closer. In the area of Chitra and Swati, it's going to go retrograde and become scary bright. I want you to notice that. Even Jupiter, when it's going retrograde, it is becoming brighter. At some point, if you guys are curious and you need to let me know in the comments, actually, I will show the magnitude change of Saturn, magnitude change of Jupiter, and magnitude change of Mars as they go retrograde. Okay, we can do that. But you let me know if you are interested in the comments. Okay, now let's watch this Mars. Okay, notice how the shape is, and now it's going to get scary bright as it goes retrograde, extremely bright, and now it will become normal again as it crosses Vakra, it crosses the ecliptic near Anuradha Jeshta, and then it goes, by the first day of the war. In fact, let me bring it back a little bit. Yeah, there, here. Okay, so there, I'm going to stop it. By the first day of the Mahabharata war, Mars is, Brahma Rashi. So Vakranu Vakram Krutvam Cha Shravane Pavaka Prabha Brahma Rashi Samavrutta, right along the same longitude as Brahma Rashi Abhijit. Okay, Nakshatra of a Brahma, which is Abhijit again, it's way up here. And Jupiter is also very close to Shravan. Notice it is on the north of the ecliptic, and over next few months, it is going to cross the ecliptic. That is the Vakra motion of Jupiter. Remember, Maghaswangarako Vakra Shravanecha Bruhaspati. Jupiter, Bruhaspati, is going to do this Vakra motion, oblique crossing along the ecliptic near Nakshatra Shravana. Shravanecha Bruhaspati. Okay, and notice the first day of the war, Saturn, it was near Uttara Falguni, it was moving in the area of Chitra and Hasta, and by the first day of the war, it has come close to Chitra. Shveto Graha, okay, whatever the verse was, Chitra Samatikramya Tishtati, okay, whatever the verse was, okay, Shveta Graha, something Chitra, okay, something like that. So this planet has come close to Chitra. That's it, guys. All right. So this is, we looking at the retrograde motion of Saturn and Jupiter together. And because these two planets are slow moving planets, slowest moving planets among all the graha or planets visible to the naked eye, you cannot fool around with them. Okay, you cannot suddenly take Jupiter from here and put it there for some other date and try to play the gimmicks, try to fool people. You cannot do that. Remember, Jupiter has to do something in the vicinity of Vishakha, and it has to go Vakra near in the vicinity of a Shravan. These two clues allowed us to identify Shamograha as a Jupiter, and it's going retrograde in the vicinity of a Jeshta, perfectly matches with the description, but also with Jupiter for 5561 BCE. Saturn, how do we know it is at the Bhaga Nakshatra? Bhagam Nakshatra Akramya Surya Putrena Pidate. The word Akramya, near, that's what it tells us. One additional clue, that Saturn has to be in the vicinity of a Vishakha. So from Bhaga Nakshatra Uttara Falguni, if you go Hasta, Chitra, Swati, 3 nakshatra, and you get Vishakha. What did you see about Jupiter? First day it was near Shravana. From Shravana, if you come, Uttarashada, Purvashada, Mula, Jeshta, Anuradha, 5 nakshatras there. Okay, so 5 nakshatra for Jupiter on the first day of the war. And actually Saturn has come very close to Chitra. So Chitra, Swati, 2 nakshatras on one side. Now, I brought up this discussion, like people will say, oh, how come 2 or 3 nakshatra on one side and 5 nakshatra space on other side, and you consider that Vishakhayo Samipasto, in the vicinity of a Vishakha. But suppose if somebody is not happy with this, he says, oh, come on, 2 nakshatra or 3 nakshatra on one side, 5 nakshatra on other side, unacceptable. Then I want to ask those Mahabharata researchers, if 2 on one side, 3 on one side, 5 on the other side is unacceptable to you, what do you consider acceptable? Okay, what do you want? 2 and 2 on both sides, 3 and 3 on both sides, 4 and 4 on both sides, 5 and 5 on both sides? Be my guest. Show that that is the case, that one planet, Saturn or Jupiter, is on one side, the other is on the other side of Vishakha, by whatever you consider as a desired separation, and show these guys for whatever year you are claiming. As soon as they hear this explanation, as soon as they hear this challenge, again, they are going to find some way to digress themselves, go on a tangent, okay, change the goalpost, somehow distract Mahabharata enthusiasts from understanding the evidence of Vasudev. All right, so that's for now. Next time I'll tell you there are many other aspects in the context of Saturn and Jupiter that we have to still explain. I can quickly summarize the Pida portion. Okay, then Akramya and Tishtati portion, that is the second one. And third, the connection of Jupiter and Saturn in the context of Vishakha, and why that has to do, what that has to do with Saptarshi, but also one more thing, why these planets are described as planets with coppery extensions. Graho Tamra Runashikho. We will address all of them one by one, slow but steady. Okay, just like that kurma of a Sthita Prajna of second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Okay, sadhana, which needs that persistence, tenacity, but also savadhata, being savad. So when you think something is not right, okay, the kasav or the turtle, tortoise, it retracts. But otherwise, at a slow and steady pace, it keeps on pursuing this path. That is our journey to understand the evidence, not only from Mahabharata, but also from all our ancient Indian narratives, not only astronomy evidence, but multidisciplinary evidence. And we are going to do this together. Again, write down your comments, write down your questions, be crisp and clean and clear. Okay, do not just ask a question. The samshaya has to be vimarsha, which means there is some thinking, reasoning has gone into asking that questions. Don't just ask a question, hey, tell me something about Jayadratha. No, that is not a samshaya. Okay, samshaya shows that you have done some homework. It is a genuine question, and if it is answered, it would lead to a growth of knowledge. Thanks again. I'll see you shortly in another episode session of Shraddha and Pradnya. Namaskar.